everyone, welcome to another episode of The Balanced Lens, where we examine faith, culture, and politics from a balanced perspective. Here we try to lay out the facts, offer pragmatic analysis, add some detail to our opinions, and hopefully apply a biblical Christian worldview. Today we're talking about something that's been stirring on the news for almost a week and a half now. It's this huge war in Iran, not a small conflict. It's a extremely large size of our military that's there right now in the Middle East. And so we want to start off by asking this question. How big really is the United States military presence in the Middle East? And right now, this amount is substantial, especially given the ongoing conflict that's being directed with Israeli operations. As of early March 2026, reliable estimates from sources like the Pentagon, Council on Foreign Relations, various defense reports put the number at around 40 to 50,000. That includes active duty service members stationed on our bases, many others serving aboard naval vessels in nearby waters like the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the Red Sea. Now, the figure can fluctuate due to deployments, rotations and escalations, but just to give you a sense of the scale, this is well above the roughly 30,000 that was more typical in quieter years, but below the massive surges seen in past wars. Like during Iraq, during that whole invasion area, we had over 100,000 troops in the area. So the buildup is described as one of the largest naval and air concentrations in the region since 2003.
Yeah, huge buildup, right? We have, even though the raw count is not as high as the Iran and Afghanistan wars, which was crossing 150,000 troops, because that was a different purpose. But for a war that has no troops on the ground, so to speak, this is the largest concentration of power that we see. We have like 2 full carrier strike groups right now in that area. We have got the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. We've got the USS Gerald Ford that's in the Mediterranean Sea. And I also believe they have called in another backup as well. It's very coordinated. And then you also see, like, in terms of just our air assets, right? You've got, for the first time, we have got the F-22 offensive Raptors that are being deployed, supplemented by the F-15s, and there's more FB-52 bombers. Like, it's a lot, and it's very impressive show of might. So yeah, it's really, the more I hear about, like, when you think about these troops, they're all under the USS Central Command, the CENTCOM. Like, how much coordination happens between the different wings of our military, just for making sure that the missiles that are coming off the various naval ships and the ones that are coming off the air, and even in the air supremacy, when we think about the airstrikes, we're talking about the stealth bombers going in first, disabling the radars. Behind them comes the non-stealth bombers because they cannot go in first. So everything's so coordinated. And so this, from what I've heard from a lot of military experts, this has been an impressive, coordinated show of strength. And in addition, coordination with the Israel military as well.
Yeah, I mean, picture this. Tens of thousands of American service members spread across this web of bases all over the Middle East, from the Gulf to Jordan, backed by 2 huge aircraft carriers, hundreds of warplanes. It's a formidable force built up over months. This didn't just deploy over the weekend. We have actually an episode on Iran you can go read about, which we did a few weeks ago when all this buildup happened. But all these assets now are fully engaged against Iran. What's interesting, it's a rare combination of so many different types of planes, because, again, this is not a small conflict. Stealth bombers to harden nuclear targets. As you mentioned, 5th-generation stealth fighters, F-22s, F-35s for air dominance. They have electronic warfare aircraft to blind defenses. As you've probably known or read about, Iran has a lot of military technology from China and also Russia. And we also have advanced surveillance planes, E-3s, really coordinating the air battle, and large bomber strike aircraft, B-1 for sustained attack, B-1 bombers for sustained attacks. So interesting, rare combination, powerful combination of military assets. But now you might think to yourself, this costs money, right? There's a lot of our military equipment there, many lives on the line. We have so much of coordination that's happening now in the Middle East for this war. And many people say, well, did Congress really approve this? I mean, should the U.S. President Donald Trump right now have gone to Congress Does the president need congressional approval for this type of conflict? And the answer to that is this: the president has inherent authority and power as commander in chief. That's his title, to use force when he perceives a threat, as vague as it is to American interests. In my opinion, to tell Congress 535 members of Congress is ludicrous. It doesn't make sense to leak out your military plans to that number of people, many of which could possibly leak those plans to other countries. There's a historical precedent as well. Under George W. Bush in Panama, Miguel Noriega, there was an operation there. I'm going back now in decades, where there was no congressional approval sought. Similarly, under President Obama, there was unauthorized use of military force against Libya for weeks. In 2016, I'll also mention this: Barack Obama dropped 26,171 bombs on Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan combined. I'm not criticizing him. I'm saying foreign policy sometimes involves involvement where the time to seek congressional approval will essentially nullify the effectiveness of your own operation. Similarly, under Biden, ordered repeated strikes against Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Somalia. So this is not brand new. This is not something Donald Trump just invented like last weekend. There's a historical precedent of presidents not seeking congressional approval for these short-term, hopefully short-term operations in the Middle East.
Yeah. And this has been this is where the balance of powers come into play. You were mentioning about the cost of the war, right? The cost of the war, just as a tangent, it's roughly about $2 billion a day. It's kind of crazy. But so from a constitutional perspective, you've got Article 1, which clearly says that Congress has the power to declare war. But right after that, in Article 2, it says the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And now the stage has been set, right? That you've got these two branches of the government, and the framers wanted them to make sure that they were collaborating with each other in important matters such as these. So then in 1973, the Wars Power Resolution was passed, and right after Vietnam happened, just so that we wouldn't have any unilateral presidential type of decision. And by the way, Vietnam was like a long drawn war, right? It's nothing compared to what we're doing right now. So in the War Powers Resolution of 1973, you've got what the key provisions say: that president can deploy forces without prior approval only in emergencies, if there's a national security emergency. But it also says that the president must notify Congress within 48 hours, which, by the way, was done by Secretary Marco Rubio in this situation. And it also says that the president must withdraw forces after 60 days, plus an additional 30 days for withdrawal time. So 60 to 90 days is the length of the war. But, it's not, this has not been practiced like you were saying, Dennis, whether it's President Bush or Obama, it's never been actually practiced. President Bush did get the authorization for use of military force before Iran and Afghanistan. But most of and this is going back to Truman, President Johnson. Nobody's really done it. But the point here is one of the important thing I want our listeners to understand is if Congress wants to stop this, they can stop it. It'll be done. They shot down in the Senate and the House the provision to stop this war, right? Which means the Senate and House both kind of are aligned with the president that it's okay to proceed with the current U.S.-Israel war with Iran. So the point is there is no imbalance of power. If Congress wants to stop this war and they don't approve of it further, they can stop it tomorrow and it'll be done.
Yeah, excellent point. It leads to the next question, right? Many people look at this war and they say, well, we're coordinating a war with Israel. Is this really Israel's war that we're fighting? Is Iran really an existential threat to the U.S.? My opinion, yes. They've been an existential threat to the U.S. for the last 45 years. The U.S. is currently at war against the largest financier of hostage takers, the largest financier of terror globally. Iran is the sole source of instability in the Middle East, and the reason we have bases in Saudi Arabia and UAE and Jordan and Qatar is solely for that reason. It's Iran, and the world has been paying a price for the last 45 years. And so this war is an existential threat to the U.S. They have been at the center of so much global instability for the last 4 decades.
Yeah, and I guess it's a term, existential, that kind of gets us in loop a little bit. Just to unpack it a little bit, right? So there's ever since they took power in 1979, there's this theological issue that we have, right, where the 12-er Shiism, which is what Iran follows. It's called a 12-er Shiism, and they have a belief in something called the hidden Mahdi. It's very interesting. So I don't want to bore the audience with the whole thing, even though I was fascinated by it. Either way, like there is an imam. There were imams that descended from the Prophet Muhammad, and so his descendants, meaning his blood relatives, are the next imams. Right? That's how the Shia branch of Islam believes, not the Sunni, the Shia. In the 12th Imam, who was very, very young when he took over the position because his father passed away. And when he took it over, right, he kind of went into hiding, and nobody really knows what happened after some time. He used to only communicate through his intermediaries. Either way, so people believe that he disappeared, and he will come back. He will come back one day to restore the glory of Islam. So that's what they say, the hidden Mahdi. So what they believe, the hardliners within this regime, what they believe, to be clear, we are not talking about the general population of the Iran, right? We're talking about these few hardliners that control the country. They believe that the chaos in the world, specifically a destruction of Israel, is a prerequisite for the Mahdi to return. That's how they may have, like it's suicidal in its belief. It doesn't matter if everything ends, because that means that their Messiah, the Mahdi, is going to come back. Therefore, like a traditional logical discussion and negotiation doesn't work. Now, let me counteract that theological view, right? Because that sounds scary. If you look at the last 40, 45 years that they have been in power, you see this rhetoric: death to Israel, death to America, the little Satan, the great Satan. But their actions have suggested they are actually more pragmatic. They are not just willing to go and commit suicide, right? So, like, I'll give you a simple example. Last year during Operation Midnight Hammer, when we dropped the bunker busters, Iran could have kicked off and ignited a big war, but they didn't. They basically just had a very symbolic show of force when they attacked our base in Qatar after letting us know they're going to do it. So they have consistently shown a very pragmatic approach. So at least till now, they have not shown completely suicidal approach. That's one part. That's a theological view. There's another view that where they have this thing where they have a forward-looking strategy in terms of defense, so they don't have to fight anything within their borders. So they have these proxies around the region. I mean, they're pretty strong. The strongest of them is Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they have like more than 150,000 projectiles, like whether it's missiles or drones, short range, medium range. So they are constantly fighting on behalf of Iran, multiple wars, especially with Israel. Then we all know about the Houthis in Yemen, right? They have proved, if you remember the last few years, they have proved that they can actually shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, and any transitional oil that goes through there, they can shut down, which is why, I don't know if a lot of people remember the Saudis, the Yemen war that happened a couple of years ago. Exactly for this reason, because they were just causing a lot of nuisance, which affected Saudi's economy, etc. And they also have, of course, Hamas in Gaza, and they've got militias in Syria and Iraq. They were propping up the regime in Syria, if you remember, till he got ousted. So they have constantly been like causing a lot of pain in the Middle East, and their neighbors generally don't have a good view of them, right, in general. So finally, the last thing I will say is, like, since June 2025, when the US executed Operation Midnight Hammer, when we tried to demolish their nuclear facility, the calculation for President Trump was that would force them to the negotiation table, and so we can have a discussion on what to do from a future perspective. Instead, what happened is Iran actually started accelerating the enrichment to 60%, which is the cutoff at which you can create nuclear weapons. They even supposedly had 90% Fordo, right? And they also started manufacturing more ballistic missiles and more. So they accelerated the manufacturing of all the equipment. And it's just one of those things where, from what I've heard Secretary Rubio's talk, is that there is a point at which if you just let Iran go, there would come a point where it's really hard to even go and do what we are doing right now, because they would have passed that threshold where they would truly become a danger. And at that point, you cannot stop them, even if you wanted to, from acquiring nuclear weapons. So that was the other thing I heard from Secretary Rubio.
Yeah. Then the way they've operated these proxies around the globe has been like a chess game, an evil chess game. And as you mentioned, it's not something that just happened last year or 2 years ago. This has been going on for 45 years. I want to give you a list of some of these events. This is going to be a long list, but I don't think we'll do the topic justice if we don't talk about what exactly Iran has sponsored directly or indirectly, which directly or indirectly affects American foreign policy and American citizens. Starting in November 4th, 1979, storming of the U.S. Embassy in Iran, 66 Americans taken, 52 were held for 444 days. 1983, bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, 17 Americans killed, 63 people total. October 1983, truck bomb at the Marine barracks in Beirut, 141 U.S. personnel killed. I said 241. That's a big number there. March 1984, there was a CIA operative named William Buckley. I'll talk about this a little later. Tortured and killed. December 1983, bombing at the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait City. December 1984, hijacking of Kuwait Airways, sponsored by Hezbollah. 2 U.S. officials were killed. June 1985, the hijacking of TWA Flight 847, Hezbollah. One U.S. Navy diver killed. July 1989, killing of U.S. Marine Colonel William Higgins in Lebanon. He was executed. Again, Hezbollah. June 1996, truck bombing of Cobra Towers in Saudi Arabia. 19 Americans killed, 500 injured. Again, 2003 to 2011, attacks by Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. At least 603 U.S. troops killed, various Shia militias, IRGC Quds Force. June 2007, the Karbala attack in Iraq, 5 U.S. soldiers killed. December 2019, rocket attack on the K-1 base in Kirkuk, 1 U.S. contractor killed. January 2020, ballistic missile attack on Ain al-Assad base in Iraq, over 100 U.S. troops injured. February 21, rocket attack on Erbil, Iraq, 1 U.S. service member, 4 contractors wounded. This was an Iran-backed militia. June 2021, rocket drone attacks in Iraq, Syria. September 2022, rocket attack on Iraqi Kurdistan. March 2023, drone strike near Syria, 1 U.S. contractor killed. 7th, 2023, this is a big one. Mass massacre in southern Israel. 48 Americans were killed, 12 kidnapped. Over 1,000 Israelis were killed, murdered, raped, and abused, indirectly sponsored by Iran through Hamas. December 2023, drone attack on Erbil, Iraq. 3 U.S. soldiers wounded. January 2024, drone attack on Tower 22 in Jordan. 3 U.S. soldiers killed. Over 40 wounded. October 2023, November 2024, over 180 attacks by Iran proxies on U.S. forces in the Middle East. About 180 wounded, 3 killed. So this list can be expanded. If you want to talk about how they've indirectly affected U.S. citizens, going back to 9/11, many of the Saudi backers, Saudi attackers, they actually traveled through Iran. They were permitted to go through the border without much security clearance. Country essentially concealed them and protected them from any type of prosecution. You can go on about what they've done over 4 decades. This is not a problem that sprung up last weekend. This has been a major problem in the world for the last 45 years, and we've decided to go to war with them in 2026. But it wasn't impulsive, right? This was not like we jumped to a war and threw in all our military at once. There have been decades of negotiation between the U.S. and Iran and many other countries. What terms were offered to Iran before the war?
So this is where the interesting thing comes. I think, so when we talk about so this was done by President Trump's special envoys, which is Steve Witkoff, as well as his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. The terms that were offered to Iran ultimately was zero enrichment, right? You have to have total dismantling of all the centrifuges and a permanent export. No permanent export of all the enriched uranium from out of Iran. A signed commitment to end all funding to all the proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, etc., within 30 days. And from an inspection perspective, it should be anytime, anywhere, not just for the IAEA, but even for U.S. inspectors, including military sites. And that was the terms that we wanted. That would have been the ideal terms that we wanted to sign. And this is different from the JCPOA, because I was also thinking through it and be like, okay, because the JCPOA, which was signed under President Obama in 2015 was torn up by President Trump in 2018. There are people who say today that, well, the whole reason we are in this war is because you tore that up. If that was in place, we wouldn't have had this problem. So it's important to just quickly understand JCPOA. I'm not going to go through every single aspect. I'm just going to go off like what is the contrast, right? With JCPOA, we are just purely talking about the nuclear weapons, uranium enrichment capabilities. That's it. What we want right now, in addition to the nuclear weapons, we are also, in addition to the enrichment and nuclear weapons, we are also talking ballistic programs, which is very important because they have a whole stockpile of them. Plus, we're talking about them stopping being a nuisance and funding proxy groups in the Middle East. So that's important. Second, you hear with the current negotiation, they talked about anytime, anywhere. And the reason is because under JCPOA, you could only go to declared sites, as you could not if you want to inspect some other site, they would basically have like 24 days. They would have a good chunk of time before you are allowed to get to that place. So, and even when you wanted to go to a declared site, you had to give a 24-hour notice. So it is not immediate. It's not anytime, anywhere. So the problem with all this was you're basically depending on Iran to play ball sincerely, right, in order for it to work. Then there was also the sunset clauses, right? Like this was only, the whole nuclear thing was only in effect for the next 10 to 15 years or so. So there was a time frame, which means that you're only kicking the can down the road. You're not actually solving the problem. So there were reasons why multiple people in the Trump administration felt in the first term that this was not a good deal, and that's why we wanted to renegotiate and have stronger deals, right, with making sure the intent is fulfilled. Anyway, so it was very interesting. Steve Witkoff's had a couple of interviews, really worth watching, and he talked about how the negotiations went. It started off in, I believe, in Oman, and the last meeting was February 26th, a couple of days, 2 days before the bombing actually happened, and right at the first day, according to Witkoff, the Iranian negotiators proactively told the American negotiators that they have 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. And they were asking the American delegation, do you guys know how many bombs can be made out of that? And of course, they didn't respond. And the Iranian negotiator said, we can make 11 bombs out of that, right? And so that was their initial position walking into the meeting, which really caught Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff off guard. So even as the negotiations went, it didn't seem like they were getting anywhere. So the feeling that our negotiators got was like that Iran believed that they already had a high ground. And they also declared to the American negotiators that they made this statement: what you guys could not capture militarily, we are not going to hand it over freely during a political process. Basically, what they're saying is, if you could not destroy and eliminate this completely and grab this during the Midnight Hammer operation in 2025, do you think we're going to give this freely to you as part of negotiation? That is very interesting. And again, these kind of phrases caught our team off guard. That's not how they're used to negotiating. We just felt there was a level of arrogance and that they were just coming in from a high ground. They almost seemed like they were thinking like, there's not a lot you can do. We are so close already. But finally, Steve Witkoff on the last day, I believe it was the last day, he said, you know what, I want to try one more last shot just to make sure that we clearly understand the intent. So he offered them 10 years worth of free uranium to help with their civil program, right? Their whole the Iranian regime has said that they want to use it for civilian purposes. So Steve Witkoff offered them a 10-year free of cost fuel to use. And surprisingly, the Iranian negotiators laughed at him and said, that is an insult to our dignity to buy it for free from you. No, we will not do that. And they flat out refused that gesture, which was basically gave the impression to our team, and that they conveyed that to our National Security Council and the president, that they don't have any intention to negotiate. They have no intention to negotiate, number one. Number two, they have every intention to get that enriched uranium and a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, and this was a 10-year attempt at negotiation that started in 2015. The 2015 nuclear deal essentially said, as you mentioned, Iran could keep a small civilian nuclear program as long as it stayed far away from building a bomb. There were violations of the treaty requirements during that time. The recent Trump administration flipped that logic. Instead of managing Iran's nuclear capability, it aimed to remove it altogether. No enrichment, far fewer centrifuges, permanent restrictions. In short, the old deal tried to slow Iran down. The newer proposal, more recently, tried to ensure that Iran couldn't run the race at all because a decade of negotiations had failed. And so the whole point being this wasn't something that the country just jumped into. This has been building for 45 years of terrorism, which culminated in this war. And so we want our listeners to understand that foreign politics is complicated. It's a chess game. If you're not in the game, you lose automatically. And so it's important to understand how geopolitical moves affect everything in your life and have affected our country for the last 45 years. With that said, what do you think? Do you think the U.S. should be at war with Iran? Do you think President Trump should seek more formal congressional approval? What do you think about our war strategy? I encourage you guys to comment below, like and subscribe, follow us for more cool content on The Balanced Lens, and hope to see you guys soon. Thanks, everyone.